reports. That brings us to item number 12, which is public participation. And we have several people who have signed up. I'd like to read from our public participation at meetings policy, BEDH, which was issued on May of 2018. The board values and encourages community involvement. Public participation at board meetings is one of the many ways the community may ask questions or make statements for the betterment of the school district. The board encourages the citizens of this community to appear and bring before the board any matter directed toward the improvement of the school system and the agenda of the board. This policy provides for any individual or group to be heard on a subject pertaining to the policies or administration of the school system. The board welcomes and encourages public participation, as you know. We respectfully ask that you adhere to the procedures and decorum provided in board policy BEDH, public participation at meetings. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Dr. Harris will be keeping time and giving you updates as the time left. And then questions asked during public participation will be handled in accordance with board policy BEDH. Further, asking questions that would inappropriately identify a student or family will not be addressed. Matters pertaining to protected personnel records will also not be addressed. Asking questions or making statements that suggest illegal or unethical activity of a district employee or board member will not be addressed and will be considered inappropriate. The privilege of addressing the board does not include the ability to make personal attacks on any board member, district employees, or other members of the public. The board chair or presiding officer is authorized to terminate the remarks of any person should the chair determine that the speaker's remarks violate the spirit and letter of this policy. So from that, I will tell you that we have several people signed up, and those people, we will start with Kim Murphy, our first speaker.
Good evening. I have suggested at public participation that the school district consider conducting a forensic audit.
Ms. Murphy, would you pull that mic up, up toward your mouth?
Its purpose is to not only detect fraud, waste, and abuse within the system, but also to detect whether the policies and practices in place are sufficient to prevent it and that they are properly observed. Obviously, as board members, I would think that this board would welcome such an audit to assure that taxpayer resources, which are taken from taxpayers by way of your taxation, are spent in a way that is efficiently and effectively provides the best education possible to our young people. But you seem to not want to do this. In addition, such an audit can help assure taxpayers that the board is doing its very best to oversee a system that balances the needs of the school district with the limited hard-earned dollars that taxpayers must provide. Unfortunately, a number of examples have occurred within this great school district that have sent red flags, signaling that fraud, waste, and abuse, like what is now going on in other school districts in South Carolina, may be happening here.
And Ms. Murphy, before you go further, I just read from our policy, you just violated our policy, talked about fraud, waste, and abuse, and red flags in this district. So consider that your first warning to stay within our policy.
Thank you, and I hope you allow me the extra time
I will.
to finish.
I do want you to stay within our policy.
Thank you. Basic annual audit itself is not designed to detect fraud, waste, and abuse, or determine whether policies and practices are preventing it. We have already seen where there were issues with policies not being observed during the recent purchase of the Amex Ferry school site. And fortunately, the board did scramble to get everything together.
I'll give you your time. You just made a statement that our own policies were not observed in a purchase of Amex Ferry Road property. You're absolutely wrong about that. We followed policies and procedures we have in place. Now, that's your second warning, but I don't really want to have to keep stopping you. You need to keep your remarks within the confines of our policy. You know what they are. You speak to this board on numerous occasions. That's your last warning tonight.
Well, I did say that the board was crossing their
That's your
T's and
last-
dotting their I's.
That's the last warning tonight.
And now, most recently, at the last school board meeting, the board approved hiring an architect, a construction manager, and raising the tax rate charged to taxpayers to fund the school, which amounted to kind of a surprise vote to some of us. and catching new school board members off guard. The action was taken without following a very important policy, a policy that helps assure taxpayer dollars are going to be spent wisely and show to taxpayers that the board made those very expensive decisions based on sound judgment and that you did the homework. It's almost inconceivable that one could push the go button on the school without having this information, and it could very easily be perceived by the public that motives were not in the best interests. FB policy, Bonding Establishment of Capital Improvements Committee, is the policy. The policy requires the committee review all capital improvement projects, establish priorities, and make recommendations to the board and the public. Key pieces the policy requires to be disclosed were not done. Key pieces include a justification, a statement of justification, an estimate of future annual operating costs, a proposed plan of financing the project. And this is where it got a little suspect. Not only was the policy potentially violated, but the policy was changed in 2014 to delete those practical key pieces without a vote from the board. And then it was then placed in the policy manual. So some board members and new board members were not aware that they were to have this information prior to their vote at the last meeting.
Ms. Murphy, I'm going to pause you one more time. You just mentioned that a board policy was changed without the knowledge of the board and without knowledge of new board members. Well, new board members
Without a
just-
vote from the board.
Well, but board policy in this district are not changed without this board taking action.
Well,
So I don't
I'll
know where
give
you're
you
coming
the
up with your information.
I'll
I
give
don't
it
want
to
to
you.
debate you about it, but I want you to stay on track. In future speakings, I want you to speak the truth without deviating and bouncing all around it. Now, you're going to get your time.
No.
We're on time right now, but you've got about 30 seconds left. I want you to wrap it up. I want you to stay on task. Keep it between the lines of policies and the truth. And please remember that for future reference.
All right, the policy is FB, was changed in 2014 without your vote. And I can give you the date because I'm trying to give you some information to help you out.
Well, we'll
I
follow
shouldn't
up
have
on
to
that
do this.
policy.
A forensic audit would catch these things. So I'm disappointed that you're accusing me of not being honest, but
That's the
February,
accusation of your remarks. You read that exactly
January,
right.
February 2014. Look that up, and you'll see, and then compare it to what's in the board policy manual. It was changed without your vote.
I'm going to ask right now that Mr. Cates do some research for us on, not right now, Mr. Cates, but we'll report that back at a future
Thank
board.
you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Paul Dupree. Mr. Dupree.
Good evening, Mr. Gant, Dr. Melton, members of the school board. My name is Paul Dupree. I'm a District 5 taxpayer, and all 4 of our kids went to District 5 schools and graduated from District 5 schools. So I've got a vested interest in the continued progress of this school district. It's been a while since I've spoken at public participation, but then again, it's been a while since I've heard so much fanatic, unfounded attacks against our school leadership. Some of you were at a school board meeting several years ago when a former superintendent stunned our community by describing the atmosphere created by a small group of fanatics as a witch hunt. And he was right then, and that witch hunt is still meandering around in our community. Mr. Lovelace, your recent diatribe in a local weekly newspaper suggests that you may have joined that witch hunt. You danced around with feigned outrage and some pointless allegations. The theme of your letter revolves around the new school plan for Amix Ferry Road. That issue was settled before the last election, and the school district is moving forward.
Mr. Dupree.
Yes, sir.
I'd ask that you not call the name of a board member.
Very good, sir.
Call out.
Over the last 25 years as an SIC chair, PTSO president, and a proud District 5 parent, I've learned firsthand that District 5 leadership will always welcome responsible questions and constructive criticism. I've learned that firsthand. At the same time, there are some witch hunt leaders who will try to abuse and obstruct responsible progress and the best interests of our children and our schools. So I would hope that all school board members will rise above this witch hunt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dupree. And that concludes our public participation and takes us to item number 13, which are actions as necessary or appropriate on matters discussed in executive session.